This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. This week's episode we recorded actually when we were still at Magic at the Beach. We've been having a lot of those here recently, but that really was a gold mine for me to really sit down and talk with a bunch of people who I hope that you've enjoyed as much as I have. Well, one of the performers actually didn't get to stay for the whole convention, but he did perform for one evening, and then he had to leave the next day because he is in such great demand, and that's Trigg Watson. Trigg and I have known each other for a long time, since I lived in Dallas, and so did he, and he has been just everywhere, performing on America's Got Talent, on Penn Teller Fool Us, on Masters of Illusion, just to name a few of the TV shows, and then other places just around the world and on cruise ships, etc. But he is really someone who is a high-tech magician. And in doing so, you really have to keep on the curve or ahead of it, because technology changes so quickly that for a short while, people must think, wow, for an instant, this must be magic. But they start thinking, well, wait a minute, there must be some technology that's being used here. We just don't understand that yet. And that's pretty much the case of what Trigg does with his magic. But he has to stay ahead of what's going on. Same thing like with social media, in order to let people know where he is and what he's doing, and to keep on the leading edge of that as well. So he's kind of walking this tightrope all the time, not only performing and getting booked in every place he works, but also trying to get his things set up, because it's just not like going out and rolling on a zigzag or something and then performing a few stage illusions or loading up the doves or whatever. He has so much work that has to be done backstage, and the lighting has to be perfect in so many ways. And as he's talking about here on this week's podcast, like when he's talking to the set director, the cameraman, and everybody, like with America's Got Talent, you just don't, again, walk on and say, okay, well, shoot me from these cameras. You actually have to do a walkthrough. Anyhow, he's going to talk about all that and a whole lot more. This really is a fascinating conversation. Whether this is something that you are ever going to do or not, at least you understand a little bit more about the mindset and what is behind and inside of the mind of someone who is trying to keep on or ahead of that leading edge of the technology curve. So please welcome my guest this week, Mr. Trigg Watson, here on The Magic Word. Today's guest is someone that I've been wanting to speak with for quite some time, and we have been going in different directions, as often is the case, it seems like, with many of the people I talk with, because they are different parts of the world, as am I, at the wrong times. Or if we are together, then we have different agendas and going in different directions, and never really have the time to sit down for a real good quality conversation like this. From time to time, though, with my friend, I do see him in some places that we get to talk, but then I don't have the microphone available. So you're all in luck. The stars have aligned, and we're finally then together with this gentleman who has been a friend of mine since he was a teenager. He still looks like a teenager, and was one of the more creative people in our world of magic. And I just would like to maybe get into a little bit of the creativity and what his muse is, and how that he comes up with all these different ideas. And magicians over the years have always been on the leading edge of not just technology, but innovation. And going back, let's say, to Jean Robert Eugene Houdon with the light-heavy trunk, and the first one to understand about electromagnets and that kind of a thing, and stopped a war. Whole other story. But the point is that the audiences don't know about the things that magicians use, and they shouldn't. And we need to keep our knowledge on that cutting edge, actually above the cutting edge or beyond. And this is someone who actually does that, and you have seen him on television. He's been on Masters of Illusion. He has also been on America's Got Talent. Spoiler alert, he didn't win. He was on Penn Teller Fool Us. Spoiler alert, he didn't fool them. And other TV shows.
And I haven't stopped any wars either, Scott, but I'm still here.
Yeah, but he's still hanging in there. He eventually is going to start a war, but don't.
No, I already am at war with my own technology.
And someone, again, I've admired for a long time. So anyhow, enough of the introduction, and that's just me talking. It's time for you to hear from my friend all the way from Dallas, Texas, then, where we had first got to know each other. This is him, Trigg Watson. Hey there, Trigg. How are you, man?
Hey, Scott. I'm great. I guess I'm from Dallas.
I like to consider that.
I don't know anymore. I don't know where to say I'm from.
Where would you hang your hat? Where do you consider home? I mean,
I hang hats in different cities. I was born in Australia, but I don't sound like it.
I can tell from the accent.
Yeah. I have this Aussie, Cajun, Texan, New England, twang that's difficult to place, because every 10 years I seem to move.
Yeah. So. But usually if you stay someplace for your first 7 years, that's where your accent stays. In other words, first 7 years. Yeah. So wherever you were, you must have been somewhere.
I was 11 when I moved to the U.S. from Australia. I've heard it's, at least from what people have told me, that if I'd moved from Australia later in my teenage years, like 16, 17, it would have stuck. But I was 11 when I moved to the U.S., and I had a thick accent. I had a thick Aussie accent up until university, college time.
Did you really?
Yeah. When you first met me, I would have had an Australian accent.
Yeah.
Of course, I was doing a silent act at the time, so you wouldn't have necessarily heard me talking much. But yeah, I tried to keep it too. I tried to hold on to it, but I got to the point, I was studying theater in school, and you learn different dialects, you take voice training, you deconstruct your voice a lot, and I just started realizing that I was faking. So I was holding on to the Australian, because of my identity. I was the Aussie kid. I got attention for that, and I just eventually let go because I've got to pick a lane here, because I didn't sound fully Aussie anymore, and I didn't want to confuse people on stage. If you're like.
But you could be a man of mystery. I mean, Banachek, for an example, is from South Africa, but it doesn't sound English and doesn't sound Australian, but there's some sort of a mystery about that accent.
Yeah, so, I think, but Australians say things like, "Did you have a bicky for brekkie on Chrissy and the Avo?" And
like what?
Yeah, there's just different words. Like, I just felt like my Australian would crop up in very weird places where I think it would just make people twitch and be like, wait, and then I've distracted them from what I'm doing on stage. So I thought, okay, I've just got to let it be what it is. There's other things that make me interesting. So
you really kind of intentionally started working more towards an American accent.
Well, I would say I was
in theater.
I was about 80% mostly American sounding, and there was like 20% left of my Aussie-ness, and I just finally decided I'm just going to let it go, and
Okay.
Yeah, there's just certain words. You say banana instead of banana. I have a mum instead of a mom. Those sort of words that I would intentionally choose to say the way I'd been raised to say them, and I realized that it was just more confusing to people than anything. So I just sort of let go and went from there.
If you listen to television news or anchor reporters or journalists in general on broadcast media, it seems they have a nondescript
neutral.
That's what I'm trying to say. And most of those come from the Midwest. Now, I don't mean like Chicago, because they've definitely got an accent, or from New York, obviously, or different parts of the country or the South or whatever. So they usually either come from that area or they will kind of, I guess, learn in broadcast school to get that accent out of it, you know. But man, I know I didn't know that. But what I remember also, you talk about doing a silent act, that was what I first remember at the Texas Association of Magicians at our TOM conventions where you had competed. And I know you won junior competition, isn't that right? Or were you over a senior?
I didn't ever do a junior competition at TOM.
Okay, you're always senior.
Because I was already 18, 19 when I first did it. So, I won a stage the first year that I competed, and then I came back a couple years later and did close-up and won.
And I just will never forget the stage act in which you were doing some juggling, and then the balls stopped in midair.
Yeah.
And to this day, it was one of those things where my mouth just kind of fell open. It's like, this kid's going somewhere. This is amazing. I've never seen anything like that before nor since. I mean, your ideas and your creativity was just off the chart whenever you were young, and obviously thinking about those kinds of things. And back then, of course, that Bizarro was probably one of your friends. He's about the same age-ish, or was he in high school with you?
Bizarro's a little older. I know. I met Biz actually in Vegas. He wasn't living in Dallas.
Okay.
He was sort of a generation above. Certainly someone I looked up to, but I wasn't. I wasn't really aware of his work until a little bit later.
Okay, because there was a pretty good group of juniors from Dallas that, and I was thinking it was around that time. They often talk about the Long Beach Mystics, and I thought, well, Dallas has really had a group of good magicians like you, like Bizarro.
Yeah, no, I moved to Dallas for college.
Steve Wyrick also was. That was well before you, I guess.
Well before, yeah. I started going to school at SMU in 2008. Mm-hmm. So it was just
where Mark Wilson went to school.
Yeah, absolutely.
He was a cheerleader.
Major.
Yeah. He what?
He was a marketing major.
Marketing major, yeah.
Business school, yeah.
And so you were in theater, or what did you study in school?
At SMU, I was a business and theater double major. Mm-hmm. Showbiz.
You knew what you wanted to do from an early age.
Yeah. Well, I walked in, yes and no. I mean, I really didn't know if I wanted to do magic full time, because there's so many things to be, Scott. There's so many things you can be in the world.
Yeah. And you're happy with your choices now, I'm sure, because you always have a smile on your face, like you're enjoying life.
Yeah. No, I mean, I finally got to the point where I felt like I could just focus on magic. But I've loved, I've always been a good student. I was in every club and organization when I was a kid. I just really wanted to do it all.
Yeah.
And it got in the way sometimes of me being able to focus on on magic. And even within magic, I feel like I'm still all over the place, like I'm trying to work in all these different markets and do all these different types of shows. And
because you're doing all of your own marketing and everything then too, right? And photography, I guess, things for your promo photos and
I mean, no, I if I need new photos done, I ask a photographer. And if I need something video edited, I'm probably going to, get someone to help. So I'm much better about collaboration and, delegating. And, I used to be much more of a do everything myselfer. And I feel like most magicians are. And we slowly, if we aspire to go to another level, we do have to be open to letting other people in.
I learned that lesson from Mark Kalin many years ago, in which he was saying, I'm good, okay, enough at these different kinds of things, whether it's advertising or laying out the ads or whatever it is, or promoting myself and whatever. But he said, I've decided to actually give that to people who specialize in those things. And you could do so much better if you let the professionals do their professional work and you do your professional work. You're focused on just your show rather than worrying about selling tickets to nights to the show. Yeah. But a lot of times when you're a one-man band and you're traveling like you do and you don't have like a residency someplace, it's a little bit harder, and you got to kind of do it all.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm continuing to try to figure out where I want to take my magic next. I've definitely gotten much better about, finding the people that know a thing or two about the thing I'm looking to do, and then bringing them into the project. And I'd say it's so much more fun too. It is fun to work with people.
Yeah.
It's nice to have an excuse to do so.
Do you find that still magic is what gives you the most thrill, or do you really enjoy doing the promotion, or is there some other avenue or phase of business that you think, eventually I'm going to stop doing magic and I might really focus my time into X?
No, I like making stuff and performing it.
Okay.
That's definitely my happy place. And everything else I do, the business side of things, which does take up a significant amount of my time, is towards, all that end of like giving myself the resources and the time to do more of the making of the thing and the performing of the thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And has there been something that you have created that you feel like this has been my masterpiece and that I can't do anything better than this, or you're always kind of going back and fine-tuning that or polishing it a little bit?
It may be true that there's something that's currently in my repertoire that, is the best thing I'll ever make, but I don't want to operate under that assumption.
Sure.
I don't know that it's even a useful thought, like I'm just going to keep feeling inspired, when I feel like, okay, this has to exist. I'm pretty tenacious about, just saying, okay, it doesn't matter how impractical it is. I'm just going to make it happen, bring it to life. And then it's kind of let go of the result, just see how it plays out, But I love that process. I love the process of saying, let me, that would be crazy to do. Let me figure out how to make it work, and then just bringing it into the world and, going from there.
Because like any artist, you are always creating new works of art and then kind of
putting it aside or selling it or hanging it in a gallery, and then you move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But still, if you go back to that gallery or to that museum and you see that hanging on the wall, you might think, I want to put a little bit more color over here or shading or whatever.
Yeah.
And likewise, I'm sure that you're still, although you have completed pieces, you still think, okay, well.
No, they're constantly under development. I am always looking for, just a way to make something a little bit better. I performed in the show at a convention that you saw last night, and there's routines in there that I've been doing for, over 5 years, but I'm still trying to figure out, okay, what can I do to make that not happen again? Or, what can I do to, have a backup plan when this happens? And it's just an iterative process, everything.
You hit upon something right there, Trigg, and that is how that most magicians will have foolproof tricks, and they practice it to the nth degree that there is no room for error to creep in, basically.
Right.
You, on every show, it seems like, are walking an edge in which quite literally, the thread could break. The battery dies, or the lights go out, or the breaker switch goes off or something. It's like, oh, well, good night.
Yeah, well, my tolerance, I rarely have to say, oh, well, good night, and end the act.
Okay.
I've done it before. If I have to, I will. But, I am, for whatever reason, maybe more comfortable than other magicians to live on that, to toe that line. And the reason is not because I don't care, about if something goes wrong. Whatever. It's, I don't care about the audience experience. It's because sometimes I feel like to make something more surefire, make an effect consistently work, sometimes you decrease the impossibility of it because you have to change the method to be something that is more predictable, safer, has more guardrails around it, and kind of destroys this precious astonishment moment, or at least decreases its impact.
I understand exactly what you're saying, because if you have too many belts and suspenders, then the method might be guessed easier by the audience.
Correct. Yeah.
So they're going to say, oh, he must be doing such and such, or using this.
Right.
But if you don't use those belts and suspenders, you are more prone to something going wrong. But it's also more amazing.
Yes.
Because they're thinking, oh my gosh, how'd that happen?
Yeah. I mean, the first effect, or the first routine that you saw me perform last night, and that I do in that opens every show I do. It's I call it my camera portal illusion. It's basically like a PK touch routine wherever there's a live camera feed on stage and it's being fed to a TV, and whatever happens on the screen happens in real life. And if viewers are interested, you can go on YouTube and type in Trigg Portal Illusion. I did it on Masters of Illusion a while back. And that routine is so delicate. Every effect is, there's the methods that I'm using are so precarious in many ways.
And your timing has to be absolutely perfect.
Yeah, well, and I try to make it so. And I'm really proud of that routine. I think that each phase is really strong, but there are things that can break or not work and are unpredictable. And most of the time, I have maybe 90-95% success of yep, that's the routine as it's intended. And then other performances, every now and then, I'll have one phase stop, a thread might break, or, and I have to say, oh, all right, I'm going to skip that phase. I have a moment where I go into the audience, and sometimes I don't do that if, something happened earlier on. Sometimes, as you saw last night, I have a very finicky candle thing at the moment, still driving me nuts. I've been working on this sort of lighting a candle through the screen for a while, and worked with a talented builder and Texas magician Randy Rain to do so. And we're still trying to work out how to make it work the best. But if that fails, I have a lighter in my case that I can pull out and use to light heat up the balloon. And, it's like all these phases. Every now and then, though, just once in a blue moon, multiple phases of that routine don't go as planned. And then I've got kind of a weak routine. But I also know that at the end of the day, I can still blow out the candle, or I can still make the balloon pop. At the end of the day, I can still land the plane. I might have to work a little harder in my next routine when I start talking.
Right.
But I personally am willing to take those risks of these little variables that can break. And for the most part, most shows, it's a It's a good routine. Every now and then, I'd say maybe 10% of the time, one or two things that don't go away as planned, but I still know there's enough phases where I can continue on.
Right.
And I'm comfortable with that. Other magicians wouldn't be. There are magicians I've worked with, I've talked to on cruise ships or at conventions that say, like, that freaks me out. I don't want to have to think about method. I just want to be able to click the button and know that it's going to work. And, the routine, that particular routine, I could do what I'm doing with safer methods. I could have a cloth on a table that has a secret presser that bumps the paper off, but then it's a cloth and a table and people, I feel like we start, muddying up and weakening the impossibility. And I just want to send people's brains to a place where they really don't have an explanation for how it could happen.
Yeah, it's Occam's razor. You don't want people to anticipate the correct answer, saying, "Oh, well, he must have done such and such." Well, yeah, you're right. That was the table, or whatever. Yeah. So you want to disprove all these kinds of things, then too. In creating that, it's particularly got to be difficult because of technology ever changing, certainly, and you are on the leading edge of that. Do you attend conferences with other people who are non-magicians to kind of understand what's happening in tech?
Yeah, I do. There's a conference called CES, which is the Consumer Electronics Symposium, and I've gone a few years in a row to that conference. And some of the tech that I've performed on television shows came from me discovering through that that avenue. Mm-hmm. I don't attend a ton of conferences, but I do, I do subscribe to newsletters, around technology, AI,
mm-hmm. Podcasts and whatnot.
I've kind of decided that's my sort of secondary domain. And to be honest, I don't necessarily have, I didn't grow up with this. I wouldn't have described myself as a technologist or a tech geek. I wasn't a gamer as a kid. I wasn't building computers in my spare time.
Okay.
I've always been a passionate magician.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you kind of fell into it.
Well, I've wanted to be a magician that is doing magic that feels like it makes sense and belongs in the year I'm living in. And for me, we can't borrow a deck of cards from someone these days. We can borrow a phone. Mm-hmm. When the iPad came
even
out,
borrowing cash is difficult sometimes because it's a cashless society.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's always been through the lens of, if I was a magician in 2025, which I am, what magic is sort of on people's minds? I have a piece in my show, which you saw last night, which is an instant Amazon order. And at the end, from a magic standpoint, it's a tip-over trunk cardboard box with a force. It's a prediction. It's basically a prediction. It's like people submit stuff, you force an item, and then you prove that you knew that item was going to be selected because it's in this box over here. But the premise is any item named, we order on Amazon and it appears in a box. And that the reaction that I get from that premise of, routine is, an effect that's old as dirt, for magicians, for laymen is really powerful. And I think it's because they think, wow, man, I wish I could order Prime that would happen in 2 minutes, or less, like that, it's on our minds, So I'm always trying to look out for what's magic that I can do that actually feels like it's something that people might already envision. Like, oh man, I think when people were on Zoom calls a lot during the pandemic, they were like, oh, I wish I could just reach to the screen and take a bite out of my mother's cookies she just baked. We think about, people joke, oh, I wish I was on FaceTime. I wish I could, smell the ocean that you're, where you're on vacation. So, trying to get as close as possible to creating magic that fulfills those subconscious desires that we have with the world that we're in currently.
Wow. That is tremendous. I know what you're saying because you've gone one step beyond what some magicians successfully do, and that is where they're trying to get into the minds of the audience through sensory perception. In other words, you start like a comedian. We'll be talking about, well, what's up with stoplights or whatever. We can all relate to it. We have to wait for the stoplight, or should we go through this yellow light or whatever kind of a thing. And likewise, with magic, you want to have things that are kind of relatable to them, and then maybe tell a personal story because they can say, oh, I can kind of relate to that thing. But beyond that, you are going to the point of not just what they can relate to, but what they wish for and what they are thinking, I wish we had this kind of technology. And you say, well, it's here today, and I can do that. And so you're an advanced thinker. That's why I was asking about going to these conferences. I would think you would just be a perfect person to encourage and inspire some creators and inventors who are coming up with the new technology today of trying to figure out, okay, rather than going over this mountain, we're going to go through it invisibly and end up on the other side without drilling a hole. How do we do that? Kind of a thing. And so you can inspire people with that kind of a thing and thinking, I guess. That's why it's important, I think, that you are keeping up on what's happening every day. Well, that is pretty amazing. With that, are you always, it has to do with social networking as well. That's another thing that is ever changing. I would have, if I was to have talked with you last year, or whenever, we might say, well, there's this new thing called TikTok that's going to be taken off. Well, not last year, but just, just thinking whenever people might be listening to this episode 20 years from now, and we're talking about some things that are going to be so outdated then, but are current now. How do you keep up with whatever? I mean, like Threads right now is something that is still, I think, in its infancy. A lot of people have caught on with that. And perhaps, again, as people listen to the future, they may say, oh, yeah, Threads is like the thing. Or they might say, what was Threads?
Magicians, we're talking about the Threads, which is the Instagram, Twitter, basically. Just a heads up, not the other threads that we use to make paper jiggle.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good clarification. So that's what I'm asking. How do you keep up with that, and what do you recommend or what do you use as far as you're reaching your people?
Well, I don't know that I can really draw much inspiration from a theme or premise standpoint from like the technologists and the inventors of the world, because they're too many steps ahead of the general public. They're great for sourcing methods, but I think it's really dangerous. There's a quote that, of course, magicians are, quote too much, and me included, is any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, Arthur C. Clarke. And I think there is a danger there that, there's certain tech that's out here already that people don't fully understand enough to be able to appreciate what it can do and what it can't do. So if you do something that's seemingly impossible using technology that people don't yet fully understand, they're just going to attribute what they're seeing to just some tech that they don't understand. There's no magic trick there.
Oh, that's interesting. You might be too advanced.
Might be too advanced. So, I'm pretty careful to, I think there's some amazingly advanced technology that the general public doesn't know about that's brilliant for methods, to use, to secretly, covertly, to do something that the general public finds incredible. But I do try to make sure that my because my audience, I want my audience to be your average human being that is not necessarily a technologist or a developer, anything like that, not an AI expert. I want to create magic that, again, feels like it's built using the stuff that's already in their everyday life. So not everyone has a 3D printer in their house.
Yes.
So I would be very careful to how I present a 3D printing themed trick. I'd want to make sure it was so clear what it can do and what it can't do. So even though I'm the technology magician, in most of my act, it's doing stuff with calculators on iPhones, people pulling up internet browsers. I do something with a robot arm, but it's very basic. It's run by someone's phone.
Right.
I use TikTok and Instagram, which everyone has on their phone. I use an Amazon Alexa. I just took Amazon Alexa out because now I'm using ChatGPT. But of course, ChatGPT is something that's become almost as synonymous as Google for a lot of people. So, I feel like I can use ChatGPT now in 2025, whereas in 2024, may not have been quite ready for it. Too cutting edge. So, I'm very careful. I really want to keep the magic relatable enough so that when I do something amazing with ChatGPT, people are like, well, I use ChatGPT every day. I know what it can do. I know what it can't do, and it cannot do what you just did. So therefore, I've experienced a magic trick.
I see.
And that's really important to me when I'm developing stuff. So in some ways, I sort of, dumb down. I don't want to be so far out there that people can't appreciate what was the magic part, because I'm the magician. I want the credit for like doing the impossible magic trick, and I don't want them to just be like, well, he's some weird tech geek, I don't know, AI or something. I don't get it,
So, do you watch sci-fi movies and
not as much as I probably should? Okay. I have trouble sitting down.
Okay,
Scott.
well, I can believe that.
And consuming, I know it's garbage in, garbage out, and you have to take in inspiration that way. And I think I could benefit a lot more from watching more sci-fi work or sci-fi art. But no, most of my inspiration really just comes from walking around and being like, what are people talking about? Oh, people have Alexas in their homes, and people are using ChatGPT. All right, ChatGPT already feels like a mind reader. Mm-hmm. It should probably be a mentalist, and then figuring out how to do that.
Right. The reason I mention that is because obviously there are a lot of things in sci-fi movies that imagine what the far future is going to look like.
For sure.
Now, there was a movie I might suggest you watch called Minority Report with Tom Cruise. It's an older movie, and by Steven Spielberg. And when he was developing the idea for this, he was wanting to have something that was in the not too far future that was exactly what you're talking about, that people could imagine, I can see it going that direction. For an example, where the main character, Tom Cruise, is walking through a shopping mall and there's like a hologram in the window saying, oh, Mr. Cruz, whatever your name was, we're having a sale on size 24 jeans today that is your size. Or he goes by a grocery store and says, your refrigerator says that you're out of milk or low on whatever, and on jelly or something. So it's like, that kind of makes sense. I could see where we were getting to that point where today we have talked about Amazon and others who know what you need. It's like, hey, you've already had this or you've ordered this before. You probably have run out by now and you need another one of these as well. Yeah. My point being is that it is one of those things that exactly what you're saying, you don't want to be too far in the future, but far enough that people could say, I can see this is where this is going. And that was exactly where he wanted to be, is like, what was going to happen like 20 years, not 200 years, but 20 years from now, what's it going to be like?
Yeah.
Having said that, do you have an image of what you think is going to happen in 20 years? I mean, there's like, of course, we have phones in our pocket and so many other digital things and things. Do you think things are going to get smaller or get bigger? I mean, we've gone from the computer to our iPhone and then to an iPad. It got a little bit larger or whatever,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's about, first of all, I consider myself a futurist magician. I don't consider myself a futurist in the larger sense, in that I really have my pulse on, trends that, the average human doesn't. But I will say, I think it's less about small or big, or like our device is going to get smaller or bigger, and how is the interface that we use to connect with connect with the larger world going to change. Mm-hmm. And I think we are at the point where the interface is sort of archaic. Like, I think 20 years from now, the fact that we carry around these boxes with screens on them is going to be ridiculous to people, because that interface of like us having to hunch over around this tiny screen,
right?
Our phones are now going to be like in front of our eyes. Our real world is now going to be, there's going to be this graphical overlay, in our vision, whether it's ocular implants or augmented reality glasses, where we can interact with the digital world in a superimposed way over our real world. And that has, challenging implications for magicians, because we are visual artists primarily, and our job is to manipulate the physical environment. And I think we take a lot of pride out of being able to say, like, you're not watching this on TV. You're watching me put a real coin inside my hand and it's gone. And you can say, I saw it with my own eyes and I still have no explanation. But I saw it with my own eyes, I think in the future, is not going to be proof that what you saw was real anymore. Mm-hmm. Because seeing won't be believing necessarily, because our digital worlds are going to be overlaying on top of our real world, and we genuinely won't be as sure that what we're seeing is happening in the 3D reality we were born in. So that's one thing. I think the interface is going to change. And then two, AI is, we are approaching the singularity. Ray Kurzweil is a famous futurist, talks about, approaching the point at which AI just goes exponential, and we reach the point, as we're getting to general artificial intelligence, AGI. We're going to start seeing the world evolving around us, not because of human ingenuity, but because of artificially intelligent ingenuity. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very difficult for any of us to predict what's going to happen. So, if you're asking for my prediction is that we're going to be less in control, and we're going to buckle up, because we're about to see the world fundamentally turn, the world as we know it is going to turn upside down. And I don't think any of us are prepared for it.
But I think regardless of what's going to be happening, we should all not only be prepared for it, but just kind of get on board with it.
I do think there is value in leaning in. I think there are a lot of people that, on moral principle, because there are some ethical concerns around AI or environmental concerns around AI, people are, there are some people that are saying, like, I'm just going to boycott this. This is not good for a variety of reasons, in my opinion, so I'm just going to keep doing my own thing. And I honestly think the only way that we're going to come out and create, work through this is to lean in. The solution is in the eye of the storm, and both as just general people living in 2025, but also as artists, as magicians, I think, and any other performing artists, I think we have to find a way to dance with this technology because the genie's out of the bottle, and find a way to evoke, really important create art that connects humans with other humans, and leverage these tools in a way that helps celebrate humanity. As opposed to just boycotting the technology completely and sort of living in silo. And I will say, I think there's a place for that. I think there is a beautiful thing about creating work where we say, we're going to turn off the phones, we're going to get rid of, we're going to avoid all the tech, we're just going to sit in a circle around a fire, and we're going to tell stories and create magic, in the world. Like, I think there's value in those experiences, and those experiences are only going to become more and more special. But I do also think, at least, for the larger world, that I think there's also value in leaning in, and trying to create with the tools that are around us, and use them in a way that we can actually bend them to our will and create something really good and wholesome, as opposed to, becoming victims of them because we don't understand them.
Mm-hmm. It makes perfect sense. I was listening, Scott Hollingsworth, my friend in Houston, a while back, was being interviewed, and he said, the question was, what if you were much younger, what would that 25-year-old say to this 75-year-old now? 50 years later, what advice would you listen to yourself, or you tell yourself if you were younger? And he said, embrace the internet. Even though that was kind of before things got started, or you knew what the internet, I think the internet came sometime later. But in other words, don't work against technology. Embrace technology.
Which is a wild thing. Like, in 2025, for us to say, oh, the advice I would have given myself is to embrace the internet. Because to Scott at the time of, his younger self, that would have been the equivalent for him of saying, well, embrace the telephone. As opposed to written letter. It just sounds so preposterous because the internet is just so omnipresent to us, right? And AI is going to feel the same way sooner than we think, I think.
That's true. Yeah. When you got to stop and think about some of the children who are being born now have been, after 9/11. I mean, they didn't experience the same thing that we did. We weren't even born yet. And so those, they're not millennials or whatever that generation, I guess. Gen Z, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Have got to have a completely different perspective on what it is that they're going to be embracing and what they're going to be creating. And I say them because they are the younger ones who are coming up with the different kind of ideas, which is what, although you're older than that, you still are the ones who's coming up with those ideas.
I'm trying, but, I think that's the challenge as we get older, especially, as an artist, you start, your lifestyle changes. You develop more of a personal life. You are stuck running the business. Maybe you want to have a family, there's things that you can't just, work feverishly 20 hours a day on your art and then sleep for a bit and then keep going. And, so I think it's so important, especially for what I do, because I am trying to create magic that's, continuing pushing, of the world that we're in. That's why I think the collaboration is really important, because there are people that are, that are becoming experts in new technology that, I physically just don't have the time for, given that I'm also trying to run the production company that is, Trigg Watson Magic. So, I'm really trying to make sure that I stay connected with young people and people that have experts in different fields, so that, I can stay ahead. Because even though, I feel like a young person, I'm 35,
Yeah.
there's still so much to learn at such a fast pace that one person can't possibly do it all.
We also touch on something else that's important, and that is since the dawn of man, we've always had and will continue to have this desire and drive and will to communicate and be with and other people, to touch, to hold, to listen, to express ideas and thoughts. And different ways of communicating now are obviously different than what they were just within even a few years ago. And the immediacy of news and things, like a butterfly loses its wing, kind of a thing in Africa, that you hear about that almost immediately, or somebody dies in another country, and then it's like, oh my gosh, you hear this on the internet, then there's that kind of immediacy. But it's important not only to get that information, but then to sit around and to talk around the campfire, like you're saying, or it used to be the old Cracker Barrel. Kind of use a thing that's kind of currently in the zeitgeist, in which the people would go like to the magic shop and they would just kind of sit around and trade ideas and talk with each other, which is an important thing, I think, and that is the human connection, I guess, is going to continue to be important, and not just a human connection via electronics. So there has got to be something in the future that obviously the electronics are going to supplement that, but I think we'll always have the need to be with others physically.
I hope so. I think the danger is are we going to lose? We might forget. I think there's the danger of forgetting. I think it could be very easy for us, decades from now, and generations below us to feel like something's missing or to feel isolated and alone, and not really to know why. Because technology does have that capacity. I think the technology around us is, statistically, on paper, it is verifiable that, we are, as a nation, we're feeling more alone, more isolated, and divided as a result of this technology. And I think it is so important for us to have more campfires.
I just to that point heard something on the Journal. It was the Wall Street Journal podcast, and there was an article talking about a fella who actually was using AI and was talking with it, and he had paranoia and started developing conspiracy theories and everything. And basically, his best friend was the AI. Now, AI is built to kind of affirm what you're saying. So it's like, well, that's a good idea, Trigg. Why don't you try such and such? Yeah. So it's never like, oh, you shouldn't be taking that gun to the school. It's like, well, you might want to think about, could be a good idea of whatever. The point is that it affirmed him so much that he ultimately committed suicide. It's kind of like, that you probably should do this. And that these things that was his phobia or his paranoia, they were affirming the paranoia. It's like, they're really out to get you. And so that's when he eventually committed suicide. So I'm saying that it can be a bad thing. Yeah. And I hope that it's not going to be going in that direction. That's an isolated case. But those are things that are dangers. I think we should watch out for as things go forward and create things.
Yeah, I don't know that it is an isolated case. It is and it isn't, right? Obviously, that's a tragedy, and I'm sure there are other tragedies like it. I think, from my mind, I think, this technology is only continuing to go. I think there is going to be more and more of a value on human experiences that are tech and AI free. And I think magicians are perfectly positioned to, and we're already seeing this, these hotel shows, where you get an Instagram ad that sends you to some theater where you pay a high price ticket to have an exclusive human experience that, feels like you're stepping into a different world. I think magicians are perfectly positioned to do that. The lane I have chosen for myself isn't that, but, I do think that's such a special thing for magicians to be able to give to people, this raw sense of wonder that can be evoked from, physically manipulating objects that are, that we've been, manipulating and moving and transforming since the dawn of time.
That you recognize that are common objects.
Yeah. But, also, we're living in this incredibly connected world, with all this technology that has the capacity to be isolating. And at least for me, I want to use that same technology that is isolating people, that is making them feel alone, and use it in such a way that pulls people into a theater and brings us closer together. So that's sort of my mission, is at least from my show, is to sort of bend that tech that's sort of scary and isolating outside of the theater and invite people in for an hour and to use it to actually create more joy in human connection.
After your shows, what do people say they remember the most? I mean, when you see somebody like a year later, oh, Mr. Watson, this was just the most, I remember the last year you did such and such, because many older magicians will say, I remember the magician who pulled a coin out from behind my ear, or my granddad did, or something. There is something that has a memory that is lasting. What is it that people take away from your show?
It's often the routines that feel relatable. Okay. People say, "Oh, I remember you pulled that thing out of that Amazon box."
Yeah.
They say, "Oh, you pulled the, you pulled the hair dryer out of the Amazon box." They say, "Oh, the hair dryer trick." It's funny because it's different each show. So I don't, right. Or they're like, you know what? I was at that show when that person said that thing. Which is ding, 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 human connection. They're remembering the human interactions.
All comes
back. That's what
sticks.
Yeah. So they might come for the hologram or the robot, but they're leaving remembering the funny human thing that happened because it felt like only they were experiencing it in that moment.
Right. Yeah, a good answer on that. And speaking of that, I know that a lot of people come because they have seen you on television, and particularly America's Got Talent, that's worldwide and has greatest exposure of anything. And I'm sure that's given you just a ton of work then as well, and exposure certainly. And in doing that had to be, you're working at other venues and you're kind of worried, but that had to be one in which you just were, your nerves were heightened. It's like, this better work.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. The act that I was doing, that I did in America's Got Talent was created in a span of a month, basically, because I had this new tech and I was excited about this concept, and I just put it on the radar of a casting producer for AGT and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm working on this cool thing. This might be good for future years. Just want to put it on your radar." And he said, "Dude, this is great. I'd love to pitch it." I'm like, "Oh no!" So I had a week to just bang together this figuring out what this act even is. All I knew was that I could have some sort of holographic image pop out of the TV. I didn't have a premise. I didn't have a routine. And my friend Kristen was like, "What about you could interact with, what about TikTok videos or Instagram videos?" I was like, "Oh, that's good. Oh, but then I gotta switch the TV sideways, and then I'm gonna have to remount the hologram tech. And I'm like, but I gotta do it. In practicality, practicality be damned.
Yeah.
Could be my motto." And I just kept iterating and eventually had that piece to do. But I hadn't performed it in front of a live audience larger than my 4 friends the day before when I auditioned with that act on AGT.
Did you worry about, okay, if this goes forward, if I go forward and they like it, it's like, oh, I don't have a second thing to go do?
Well, fortunately, I was on AGT 2 years prior, and only 2 seconds of my act aired, which meant that I had an amazing dress rehearsal for thinking through those sort of scenarios.
Yeah.
And I'd already been sort of thinking about what I would do for a semifinals act. So even though there was a ton of work in between my audition and appearing in the semifinals, I wasn't starting from scratch. I already had a sense of the kind of magic I would like to perform. I already had some tech that I was excited to use. So it was more of an expansion on that idea.
Did you have a crew or some other people, some backroom creators or something, I guess a think tank you can go to, or someone to bounce off some ideas?
Yeah. I had some amazing magician friends really rise to the occasion, help me bounce ideas off of. I had some people on the act that I was doing required, a lot of people on deck. I had my friend Kyle on Zoom, interacting from remotely, and then I had other magicians helping me make sure that everything was happening. We had a team of 4 for the act. But then beyond that, I had people, Franz Harari was really helpful, me thinking about this, appearance illusion that I did at the beginning. And, technology folks, I was asking for help. And yeah, it was a team effort, truly. And
you've been on television before, and so you kind of had an idea that wasn't going to be part of the issue as far as knowing where the cameras were going to be.
Yeah, but when you're on when you're preparing for a TV show, you're performing for 2 people simultaneously. So you're performing for the live audience. Kind of 3 for AGT. You're performing for the live audience, you're performing for the judges, and then you're also performing for
television camera.
Yeah, the television camera, and you have to plan out each frame. And it was, I think, really exciting and thrilling to work on America's Got Talent, who's, their show is such a machine, and they know how to tell a story.
And did you talk with the cameraman before and say, okay, well, make sure that when you're shooting, you don't want to get this angle or whatever?
Not only did I talk with them, we rehearsed it.
Okay.
Especially for a live show for AGT. I mean, you work in concert with them and create a storyboard of this is what happens at this time code, this is what's happening at this time code, and we plan it all out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good advice for other people who are going to be working on, or any TV show. I learned a lesson the hard way when I was doing Cups and Balls for like a morning show or something. And there was a 2-camera shoot, and I just went in early in the morning. As you know, sometimes you have to get up way early and go and do that. And so we didn't have time to run through it. It was done live. And so when I'm talking about this, you can hear the person I'm entertaining just screaming with laughter. It's like, it's a surprise and everything. In the meantime, the camera was on my hands, and as I was loading and everything, it's like, they should have had a wider shot.
Right.
It's like, this is the instructional view, and everybody else is probably watching at home and thinking, why are they screaming? Because he's just putting this thing underneath the cup and now lifting it. And I think that's important not only to work with the cameraman, but if you can do live rehearsal beforehand, absolutely.
I think, I mean, there's different directions we could go with this, but I think for a talk show such situation, it's very rare that you have a ton of rehearsal time. So often what I'll first ask in an email prior is I'll say, what cameras are we working with? 2 cameras. Do we have a man on, a camera on shoulder? Are they locked in? Are they on dollies? How far can we pan in and out? Is there an overhead? And then it'll tell me, and I'll be like, great. Okay. So I'll think through, okay, how do I want to present this? And then I will, I didn't get a chance to do that this week, but with time, I would actually have my friend film with an iPhone and actually rehearse the routine, from the standpoint of how would I like this to be shot? And if you've got time to share that with the station in advance,
the producer,
they might watch it, they may not, but at least you've got it in your head. And then I also like to live direct. So I'll say, okay, Sean's on camera 1, and then what's the name of the guy on camera 2? And I'll say, do you mind if I just say, hey Sean, let's get a close up on this, or hey Steve, like you can kind of live direct your own shot if you have to when you're in a talk show. For AGT, of course, you plan it out in advance, and I actually auditioned for AGT with my camera portal act, 2 years before I did the show again, and we filmed the audition as it would be shown on TV. So I had my friends play the role of judges, and we had a camera locked in on the judges, and we filmed it in my studio, my studio apartment. We set up the shot so that the judges could see, okay, this is how it would be filmed, this is how it would play.
Right. Wow. Well, that's, taking it to the nth degree, but I think you have to in order to be successful. How come it was only just a few seconds in the first one? I guess that you didn't go forward, obviously. You were just showing some snippets?
No, I mean, I didn't know whether I was going to advance or not, until halfway through the summer, but the AGT always films more acts than they need. And for whatever reason, I ended up on the cutting room floor. I got 4 yeses standing out from the judges. Like, the act itself went great, but they always film more than they need. And I think, they always want to make sure they have a diverse range of magicians as well. And for whatever reason, they took out 2 seconds of a balloon popping in Sofia Vergara's hand and used that for an opening montage clip to advertise the show. And then the rest of the act never ended up airing. And that just happens. They are in complete control of what stories they choose to tell every.
That's true, because I have talked with people who have actually been on, and they said, well, everything went great, but whenever they saw it, actually, it's like people were booing or Xing, holding their arms together or something. And it's like, well, that wasn't the experience that I had, but that is how they edited it together for whatever reason. Correct. I mean, they've got an agenda, I guess.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, when you're signing the contract, you kind of sign your life away. Is that correct? Or
yeah, I mean, I had full trust that I had enough trust that our goals were aligned. To where I felt like, okay, we're trying to achieve the same thing here. AGT in more recent years has figured out that, if we make magicians look good, the show succeeds.
Now they do, yeah.
And they didn't always know that.
Right.
So, that gave me enough trust that, I could sign my life away and trust.
Right.
It's like a romantic relationship, right? You really are giving you their trust, and I felt really confident in the people I was working with.
Did you have a friend who was an attorney or somebody to look at the contract? Or
I did.
Okay, yeah. That's smart. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, of course. But, at the end of the day, you can't redline anything. Yeah. They just won't have you on the show.
Yeah, so, it's either yes or no sign or no.
You really just want to know whether, you just have to, it's important to understand what you're signing, but the hopes of, negotiating with them, they have all the power. So it's completely up to you to decide whether you want to take that risk.
If you had gone forward, would you have signed on, or I guess by contract, you would probably have to do whatever they're going to be. They own you for another year, and so would you have gone to Vegas or wherever to be in the AGT show?
I think it's only if you get in. It's only really if you win that they really have some ownership over you. There's not a lot of money in magicians. There's money in musicians because they want the album sales. They want to own the rights to the music.
They go on in perpetuity, whereas magic is a live kind of experience.
Yeah, correct. So they I think they just have. So that's the other thing is the contract is scary, but at the end of the day, they don't. There's not a lot that they can get out of you. If, as a magician, they could take a percentage of your fees, but in the grand scheme of things for magicians, in comparison to someone selling out a stadium, it's just not enough to be really worth your time. So that was the guidance I got as well.
I'm assuming that Matt Franco and Shin Lim, who are big in Vegas, still have to pay some percent of the ticket prices.
I've heard rumors different ways. I think Shin's situation might be slightly different than Matt, but I'm not aware of the details either.
Of course, no. Yeah. I would just think that they still own a little bit of a piece of you. So, start to wrap up. What is going to be your plan for the future? As far as we talked about what's going to be happening and predicting the future, trying to project forward what's going to be happening, but over the next few months or a few years or whatever, as far as I think we were talking the other night, and you've got some things booked into 27. I mean, right now, so it's like you're a couple of years in advance right now of going forward. So, what are some things that you're actually looking forward to? I mean, cruise ships or something else? Or
no, well, I really want to. I'd love to collaborate more with tech companies and use my magic to kind of celebrate whatever products they're using. I've really found a sweet spot, I think, where I'm hosting and opening up large scale corporate conferences. I also really love doing my theater show where I'm just performing for a ticket paying audience. So I want to expand and tour more with that ticket paying audience. I'd love to share more of my creative process with the general public, not necessarily revealing the the magic method side of things, but just taking people on the journey. I recently got asked by invited to perform this crazy project at Magic Live, which you saw, where I cloned myself as an AI clone and taught my AI clone to do magic tricks. And I created a fun little documentary video vlog around that creative project and behind the scenes and the challenges we faced. I'd love to get into the habit of sharing more of those creative processes and creating video content around that, and maybe using that to bring more people into my world and share what I do, so they show up to a live show. And
you touched on that thing, the ETC, the experimental theatrical concepts that was at Magic Live, and I know you had some challenges there, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it's like good night. And
we had one show where the AI stopped responding, and it was for the silliest reason. The credits on my subscription for the AI platform ran out, and they gave me no warning
during the show,
in the middle of the show.
Well, now that's a good excuse, I guess. I don't know that everybody knows that. That's an interesting insight.
Yeah.
You didn't know it at the time. You were wondering what the heck's going on.
Yeah. And when the act is the premise of the act is you asleep in the chair while your AI clone does the magic act.
Okay.
There is no you could just stand up and launch into a normal magic show again. But I felt like that kind of violated the premise. Right. And that the spirit of this show was experiment, right? It was the experimental theater concept. So Stan, gave. By creating a show like that, they were embracing, that this is an experiment and you're seeing stuff that hasn't been done. So I felt very supported to, take some, even that act is not ready to be in my stage show whatsoever, but I was able to take the risk on that because I knew that people were here to, acknowowledging that is the spirit of this.
Well, I wanted to address that because I know people were saying something about the show. It's like, wow, that was one of the worst shows of all the, I mean, not you, but I'm just saying the ETC to begin with.
Yeah.
And I was saying, well, the concept of that was exactly what the name implies. It's experimental. This is something in which it's not supposed to be taken from someone's act. It's kind of like, I've got this idea and I need a venue and I need an audience to kind of watch and maybe start to work this thing out. So it certainly was not fleshed out. I mean, not just yours, but that was the concept, I guess.
I mean, Stan's hope was that this, he said explicitly to me, he wanted to support, concepts for acts that, they could put a little, throw a little money to help develop it and give it an audience. And then hopefully it would go from there and continue being developed. And I think at least for my act, he succeeded in that. I mean, I'm talking about the future. I'm excited to continue playing around with this concept and seeing how do you teach an AI to do magic and what are the challenges there? And more than anything, I think we learn about why as humans we are so that we have an aptitude for performing it and experiencing it, and learning about why an AI struggles to do magic is in some ways it makes you fall in love with what makes a human really good at what it does. It's like it almost makes you appreciate the human skill set even more.
Yeah. Well, as we close, name of my magic, this podcast, as you know, is called The Magic Word. So my question is, what is important to you? What's your magic word? What's your philosophy of life?
Well, that feels like two different things, Scott.
Well, it is, but it's something, what do you live by? I mean, you wake up in the morning, something gives you joy, you look forward to.
Yeah. I think just creating, just making things.
Create. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, create would probably be the word for me.
Yeah. That's a good one.
I mean, that is magic, for me. That is like, I mean, abracadabra literally is it's Latin for I speak, therefore I create into existence, or something like that. I'm doing a bad paraphrase, but yeah, just that I love to have, have an idea and then do everything I can in my power to bring it to life so that other people can see what I see.
Yeah. That's great. Trigg, I've enjoyed our conversation as I always do,
Me too.
In talking with you, and a lot of good insight here, and I hope that everybody who's listening got as much out of it as I did, certainly, and thank you for your time and your words and your friendship. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Likewise.
So with the Magic Word Podcast, that was Trigg Watson. This is Scotty out.
Thank you very much, Trigg, for being my guest this week on the Magic Word Podcast. I really, as I said there, I earnestly and sincerely enjoyed our conversation. It was so much fun and so much information that you imparted to us, and I am certain that the rest of you listeners have enjoyed it as much as I did. And there was a little bit of something for everyone there, I believe. And I hope that if you enjoyed this, you might feel inclined to go out and give us a 5-star rating on whatever podcast domain or however you listen to your podcast, whether it's iTunes or Spotify or iHeartRadio or whatever it is. Please give us a 5-star rating and some nice comments. We would certainly appreciate that. And I also hope that you will share this so that others of your friends who are magicians will learn a little bit more about it too. But I guess most importantly, I really hope that this week's episode has inspired you to think about your magic and how that you might carry it into the new generation, and how that you can carry this, I guess, into the future, because we just can't stay in the past with these box tricks and different kinds of things that so many of us are performing with and using all the time in our acts. We just need to move this forward and actually try to perform for the 21st century rather than doing something that is from the earlier centuries. I think you understand what I'm talking about. Just look at your act, look at what you're doing, look at what you're wearing, how you're dressed on stage, and how you're performing. Is that the look that you think your audience really wants in order to take you into the future and to give you the success you need? Just really take a look at yourself. Well, anyhow, kind of getting off sidetrack here. I think I want to wrap this up because it's been a pretty full episode. And again, I want to thank Trigg Watson for being my guest. And also, one last thing I want to mention, if you have not subscribed to the pod letter, please do, so this way you keep up to date each week with who's going to be on each episode and also who's going to be coming up from week to week. We've got a lot of great episodes still coming here shortly that I've already got in the can and ready to go. So until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember to do anything you can to bring your ideas to life so that others can see what you do. This is Scotty out.